Hi, my name is Teresa Schenker. I am the Language Program Director of German at Yale University. And today I would like to present some research that I've recently completed on our short-term summer abroad program. And the title for my presentation is How Short is Enough? Summer Study Abroad and Global Competence. And in this presentation, I am comparing two models of short-term summer study abroad, one of which includes 4 weeks in Germany, and the other program model includes 8 weeks in Germany. And I will explain what these programs are and compare their effectiveness. So here's a quick overview of my presentation. I will give a little bit of research background, tell you why I was interested in investigating this. I'll explain in more detail how our study abroad program works, and what the components are. And then I'll investigate the development of global competence in this study abroad program in the two models that I will describe for you. Then after presenting the results, I'll give some brief suggestions for how cultural learning can be increased through specific activities in short-term study abroad. And then I will summarize the findings and give a brief outlook. Okay, so let's start with some background and previous research on short-term study abroad. We'll start with some basic facts that most of you are likely familiar with, especially if you're also involved in short-term study abroad. Maybe you're running summer programs too. So in 2017-2018, a little over 341,000 US students studied abroad for academic credit. This was an increase, so overall an increase over 2016-2017. So overall participation in study abroad is increasing, which is great. However, the trend is definitely that more and more students are participating in short-term study abroad programs. Summer programs are very popular, and participation in long-term semester and even academic year programs is declining and has been declining recently. And here are here's a brief comparison. If we're looking at the data from 2005-2006 and 2017-18, the academic year abroad was 5.3% of overall participation numbers and has declined to 2.2%. And we see that the summer term abroad is increasing. More and more students are participating in programs that take them abroad for a summer. This statistic is also taken from the Open Doors report 2018, and here again it just shows that short-term study abroad is the most popular form of going up, the most popular model for students. Mid-length of one semester or 1 or 2 quarters is also fairly popular, but not as popular as short-term, and very few students are interested in going abroad for a longer period of time. And considering these statistics and the preferences of our students, we wanted to know at Yale where I work, what are the benefits of short-term summer programs, and that's basically where the research starts. So some of the previous research on the benefits of short-term study abroad. We'll first look at language skill We'll first look at research on language skills, and then we'll look at the research on intercultural competence. Generally, we can say that there are mixed results on the language outcomes of short-term study abroad. Some research suggests that fluency can develop even in short-term programs, but it could be at the expense of grammatical accuracy. Several studies have reported increased speaking proficiency after short terms, such as 6-week programs in the summer. However, other research then says that this speaking proficiency has only increased for some students, so not all students make progress after a short time. And whether they do or do not make progress has been shown to be impacted by their level of cultural sensitivity before going abroad. Other research has also said that the courses that the students have taken before they go abroad may impact how much they develop their language. So whether they already know the language, how well they know it, as well as other courses they may have taken, impacts the outcomes of their experience abroad. Research has also shown that especially advanced students may be able to develop grammatical and lexical accuracy. Beginner or intermediate students may not be able to do so in short-term programs. And overall, it's been said that not all students increase their language skills in short-term study abroad programs. Research on intercultural competence has has said that longer stays abroad are generally more beneficial. Research that compares the duration of study abroad programs always outlines the specific benefits that year abroad, or at least semester abroad, has over shorter programs. So Dwyer, for example, does say that the year-long programs are the most beneficial for students to develop intercultural competence. However, another study suggests that 13 to 18 weeks is really the ideal length for developing intercultural competence, and that seems to be the length of a typical semester. Studies have shown that in short-term programs, it is not guaranteed that students will develop intercultural competence. Similar to the language skills outcome, positive change has been shown for some students, while others have presented little change in intercultural competence. Research also shows that students may develop in some areas of intercultural competence, whereas other areas don't increase much. Research suggests that students do increase their cultural knowledge through short-term programs, while island programs may not be very suitable for developing intercultural competence because students don't have a lot of opportunities for interacting with members of their target country, and that may prevent them from developing intercultural competence. Overall, one could say that some positive results have been shown for short-term programs. Students themselves perceive intercultural gains. They think of themselves as having become more interculturally competent. They also have changes in how they perceive the host country, which have been said to be positive results of short-term study abroad. There have also been concerns have been voiced over short-term programs. Gudikons, for example, says that short-term study abroad is an incomplete experience. It does not provide enough time for students to develop intercultural competence or change their attitudes. It has also been suggested that when students are abroad for short programs, they tend to choose the path of least resistance, and that means that they take the easy path, which means they avoid meaningful interactions with locals, but only through these meaningful interactions would they be able to develop the intercultural competence. So contact with members of their target community is a necessary part of developing intercultural competence, and this type of contact is limited in short-term programs, but how it is limited or how much of it is possible in short-term programs always depends on the type of program, which is also why the results on short-term study abroad differ. And I just wanted to include two quotes which I thought were very strong about short-term study abroad programs. And Jackson said, there are no guarantees that simply being present in the host environment will bring about interculturality. And similarly, Bennett says intercultural learning does not happen automatically. So while some studies have outlined that short-term programs can help students develop intercultural competence, the program, the way it's structured, the interactions that are provided for students with members of the community will impact how much or if at all they can develop the intercultural competence. So the question generally guiding this project then was, how short can summer programs be to still be effective in fostering intercultural competence? And how can programs maximize the development of intercultural competence by designing specific activities, by including components that have been shown to foster intercultural competence more, and so on. So as the next part, I will describe how the study abroad program works. And there were two programs that I'll talk about. And the first program is second year German in 8 weeks. So after students have completed 1 year of college German, they can participate in this summer program. It's 4 weeks in New Haven, so in the USA, and then the next 4 weeks are in Berlin, Germany. So it's considered, the first 4 weeks is considered third semester German, and then the 4 weeks in Berlin are considered fourth semester German. So altogether it's second year. The textbook that the students use is Stationen. It's a fairly common second year German textbook. While they are abroad in Berlin, Germany, the students had stayed with host families in Berlin. Everybody had their own host family. The 4 weeks in New Haven, students stayed in dormitories or off campus. It was up to them where they stayed. During the Berlin 4 weeks in Berlin, there was also a cultural program. I will talk a little bit more about that later on. And data for this type of program was gathered for the summers of 2015 through to 2017. So altogether, 3 cohorts of students did the program with 4 weeks abroad. And then the second type of program, we changed from this 4-week model to the second type of program, which is still second year German in 8 weeks. But instead of having the first 4 weeks take place in New Haven, we spent the entire 8 weeks in Germany. The first 4 weeks, students spent in Jena, Germany. It's a small town in former Eastern Germany, pretty much in central Germany. And then the second set of the 4 weeks, they were still in Berlin. The textbook was the same, so they also used Stationen. In this program, students had an 8-week homestay component. They had host families both in Jena and Berlin, so a different host family for the 2 parts. It included an 8-week cultural program because they were in Germany for 8 weeks, and the cultural program was part of the entire 8 weeks. And data was collected for 2 summers, 2018 and 2019. So the cultural program in Germany, for the first program, the one that consisted only of 4 weeks abroad in Berlin, the students had afternoon activities. They went to museums. They did an underground tour of Berlin. They attended a theater performance. They watched a German movie at the movie theater together. They also visited several of the historical sites. They did city tours, a boat tour on the Spree River, and so on. So the precise activities could differ slightly from year to year depending on availability. But generally, students participated in about 3 afternoon activities each week. And they also did weekend trips. They did a one-night trip to Hamburg, a one-night trip to Dresden, or a one-night trip to Leipzig. Again, the Dresden and Leipzig trips, sometimes it depended on the year whether they took place or not. And on these weekend trips, when they went to these other cities, they stayed at youth hostels. The teacher came with them, and they also did more exploration and cultural activities as they visited these cities. They went to museums and did tours and so on as well. For the 8-week program in Jena and Berlin, the activities in Berlin were the same as for the 4-week program, so the same as I just outlined. And in Jena, the activities also included afternoon activities. They visited museums. They also visited a lot of cities nearby because there are a lot of important cities that are very close to Jena. Jena is much smaller than Berlin, so we had to leave Jena to explore more of the environment and get more exposure to German culture. So we visited Weimar, which is known for the authors Schiller and Goethe, Erfurt, which is the capital of Thuringia, the state in which that Jena is located in, Eisenach, Leipzig, other cities that were nearby. We also went to a German movie. We saw a planetarium. We visited churches and so on. So similar activities as in Berlin, just in Jena and the environment. And it also, the Jena component also included weekend trips, such as a 2-night trip to Munich, which again included more activities, visits, museums, and so on. Overall, the program, the 8-week program consisted of 3 hours of class daily. That was always in the morning from 10 to 1. And that was obviously important because students had to learn the material of the second year German within these 8 weeks. Students also had to complete daily homework. There was an online workbook that comes with the textbook that they had to, in which they had to complete activities. There was also journaling homework. They had to alternate between a written and a spoken journal every day. And they had weekly homework, essays, and projects. There were also weekly tests. So overall, the class activities and class assignments were almost identical to the regular second-year assignments the students would complete if they were taking second-year German at Yale during the regular semester. But we added some specific cultural components, cultural activities to target cultural learning while abroad. And I'll talk a little more about those later on when I talk about suggestions for increasing cultural learning during study abroad. The language level of the students when they began this 8-week program was on average an A2. So that's an intermediate mid on the ACTFL scale. Okay, now after I've summarized the program, I'll talk about the research questions and the research project and the results. And as I said earlier, I investigated the development of global competence in short-term study abroad, and specifically I compared the 4-week program model with the 8-week program model. So the research questions that guided this project are first, I wanted to know what are the effects of the 8-week summer program that included the 4 weeks abroad on students' global competence. Then I wanted to know what are the effects of the 8-week summer program abroad on students' global competence. And lastly, I wanted to know how do the effects of a 4 and 8-week abroad component differ. And the reason that I was interested in comparing these two models is I wanted to find out if the 8-week abroad program had specific benefits, if it allowed students to develop more or in different areas of global competence, and really whether this was a more successful model for us, also for the future planning of our study abroad offerings. So for global intercultural competence, I worked with the GCAA, which is the Global Competence Aptitude Assessment. And so they define global competence as having an open mind while actively seeking to understand cultural norms and expectations of others, and leveraging this gained knowledge to interact, communicate, and work effectively in diverse environments. And I like this definition, but in generally, I prefer the shorter and more succinct definition of Fantini, who says that intercultural competence is a complex of abilities needed to perform effectively and appropriately when interacting with others who are linguistically and culturally different from oneself. So the Global Competence Aptitude Assessment is a test that's available online. It's not free, but it's quite affordable. I use this tool to assess students before and after the summer. So for the students that went abroad for 4 weeks, they took the test before the entire 8-week program, so before the New Haven program started and then at the end of Berlin. And the students who went abroad for 8 weeks did it at the beginning and at the end of these 8 weeks. The test is not language or culture specific, so it does not ask for specific German information or anything like that. It can be used to assess anyone who would like to know about their global competence aptitude. The model includes 8 dimensions of global competence, and these are split over 2 general dimensions, which is internal readiness and external readiness. Internal readiness includes self-awareness, risk-taking, open-mindedness, and attentiveness to diversity. And external readiness includes historical perspective, global awareness, intercultural capability, and collaboration across cultures. And to better outline or to better understand how the model works, I wanted to define for you what is meant by internal and external readiness. So internal readiness is the global knowledge and people skills acquired throughout your life and work experiences that enable you to effectively navigate the complexities of today's interdependent world. And then on the other hand, external readiness is the personal characteristics and attitudes that enable individuals to effectively understand and interact across cultural boundaries. And the model also includes this graphic, which I think is quite helpful. So we can see that at the core is the internal readiness. We have the self-awareness, risk-taking, open-mindedness, and attentiveness to diversity. And then the outer layers of the model are the external readiness, historical perspective, global awareness, intercultural capability, and collaboration across cultures. All right, so next I'll present the results of the research. And you can see here first the results for internal readiness. And I decided to just present this in one chart. We can see here that the lighter blue bars are the results from the students who spent 4 weeks abroad, and that was 42 students. And the dark blue is the results from the students who spent 8 weeks abroad, and that's 34 students. And we can see in general, by just looking at internal readiness 1 and 2, that would be before summer and after summer, that both cohorts, both the 4-week and the 8-week students, increased their overall scores. So these scores are out of 100, 0 to 100. And we can see that for all the categories, for self-awareness, for risk-taking, and for attentiveness to diversity. In each of these dimensions, both the 4-week and the 8-week abroad students showed increases if we're just looking at the descriptive statistics. This next graphic shows you the results for external readiness. And here again, we can see that for almost all of the dimensions, both the 4-week and 8-week abroad students did increase, with the exception of global awareness. Here we can actually see that both cohorts, the students that spent 4 weeks and those that spent 8 weeks abroad, actually decreased in their global awareness. All the other categories we see small, but we do see increases if we're looking just at the descriptive statistics. And a potential reason why we might see a decrease in global awareness is that, so the assessment works with statements to which students express their agreement. And with global awareness, it could be the case that after such a time abroad, students actually are more aware of what they do or don't know. And so sometimes at the beginning of a program or before students spend time abroad, they're less critical of themselves, they overestimate themselves. So in part, it could be true that the post-summer assessment, the lower global awareness assessment, really might be a more accurate reflection of how they feel. But that's just an idea, and we'll have to look more closely at the data to find out why this is the only area in which both the 4-week and the 8-week groups decreased. So for the statistic results for internal and external readiness, we can see that both the students who spent 8 weeks and those who spent 4 weeks abroad increased in statistically significant ways for internal readiness overall. And while they showed small increases for external readiness, these increases were not statistically significant. Next, we'll look at the separate dimensions within internal and external readiness to see in which of these areas the students showed statistically significant increases. And the students who spent 8 weeks abroad showed statistically significant increases for self-awareness, risk-taking, open-mindedness, and attentiveness to diversity within the internal readiness dimension. And within the external readiness dimension, they showed statistically significant increases in historical perspective and a statistically significant decrease in global awareness. And I had talked about that previously. The students who spent 4 weeks abroad showed statistically significant increases for open-mindedness and attentiveness to diversity within the internal readiness dimension. Within the external readiness, same as the 8-week students, they showed statistically significant increases in historical perspective and statistically significant decreases for global awareness. Comparing the global competence between the students who spent 4 and 8 weeks abroad shows that the 8-week abroad cohort showed stronger gains only in self-awareness. And you can see on the right the chart here where I showed you the statistical significance of that. But overall, the 8-week abroad cohort showed larger gain scores in internal readiness overall, and then in the subcomponents of self-awareness, risk-taking, and open-mindedness. They also showed larger gain scores in external readiness overall and in the dimension of intercultural capability. The 8-week abroad cohort showed a less negative gain score for global awareness. Both groups, as I mentioned earlier, decreased in global awareness. And the 4-week abroad cohort showed larger gain scores in attentiveness to diversity, historical perspective, and collaboration across cultures. So next, I'd like to provide some suggestions for how we can increase students' cultural learning during short-term study abroad. And this is based on projects and activities that we have implemented in our summer program that we have found to be beneficial and that students have responded positively to. So the first is a daily reflective journal. In our journal, students alternate between writing and speaking. They have a question or a prompt, a topic that they have to discuss. They all keep this reflective journal online, and this not only helps with daily speaking and writing practice, but it really helps them to reflect on what they're experiencing, on what they're encountering, and in general, a reflective component in study abroad has been said to be very, very important and should be included in all programs as much as possible. The next thing is a group photo blog. For this, as I said, it's again a blog, but all students contribute to it. They get a daily prompt and they have to take a picture in the target culture that fits this prompt. This could be anything from dining culture, green Germany, multiculturalism, anything that fits what is taught in class, but also what helps students to think more deeply about culture, to pay more attention to their environment, and then to take a picture and to post this and to write a description of what students thought about when they saw this or why they took this picture. This is also a great way to bring what they experience outside of the classroom back into class, where these photos can be used for discussion, for warm-up, and so on, and just to further the cultural learning. Next, we suggest cultural exploration projects. Specifically, we include ethnographic studies and a large group video project. Both of these allow students to really get more into the target culture, to speak, to observe, to speak with members of the culture, to learn more and to advance the cultural understanding of the target culture. We suggest to focus on cultural learning both during class time, so these students had 3 hours of class every day, but also on excursions. There are always opportunities for helping students tackle new questions, ask what's going on, why is this the way it is, to help them understand and think more deeply about differences, similarities, and what they're seeing and noticing. And lastly, having a virtual meeting space where students can ask questions and get answers can be very helpful. This could be a WhatsApp group that everybody is a part of, or a Facebook group, or another a discussion forum, another kind of space where students are open to note observations and see, has anybody else noticed this? What do you make of this? And I recommend to start this already before going abroad, because a lot of times students have questions about where they're going even before they go there, and it is nice for them to both have a place to exchange their thoughts and ideas, but also to know that there's a space where they can freely ask and get answers, and everything is taken seriously, and there are no stupid questions. And I have found that this is very helpful, and students make a lot of use of it. Particularly in our context, the WhatsApp group has worked very well. And here are some images of these projects that I just explained. So on the top left are some pictures of the photo blog. And if you'd like to see more pictures and look at what this blog looks like, I have pasted the link for you. Feel free to take a look at that. Up on the top right, it's just a screenshot, but it's of a final video that students made about Green Berlin. And they interviewed people in Berlin about what they do to be more environmentally friendly. And it was very successful. On the bottom left, it's just a screenshot of a video that students made about the Berlin art scene. They went to a lot of museums and galleries and also spoke with people. So that was very informative and allowed them to learn more about this part of German culture. And then on the right-hand side, you just see a screenshot of the daily journaling that I also mentioned, and that I think is a great activity for increasing cultural learning. So last, a brief summary and some outlook. So the 4 and 8 week abroad programs can have positive effects on certain dimensions of global competence. Neither program allowed students to make statistically significant increases in all of the components that were measured, but both programs allowed students to make significant increases in some of the areas. There is room for improvement, which means we can still look at the programs and see what else we can do, what activities we might be able to change. Specifically in the future, I'd like to look more closely at the global awareness component to see why the students decrease, to see what we can do to maybe help them not decrease in this area. But more research is still needed to investigate how we can maximize learning outcomes of short-term study abroad. Overall, the results suggest that the 8 week program may provide more opportunities for increasing global competence, but the findings were not so outstanding that I would say that the 8 weeks is the definite must. The 4 weeks is not effective at all. The 8 weeks is a little more effective perhaps, but the 4 week model with these targeted cultural activities is also quite effective. And so if space or if time is a problem, if students cannot go abroad for 8 weeks, then a very concentrated, well-designed 4 week program can be very useful. Lastly, I suggest to look at the connections between students' language proficiency, language learning, and global competence during short-term study abroad, because previous research has often suggested that there is a connection, and we'd like to investigate whether we're sending students abroad at the right time in their language learning to make the most out of this opportunity for improving language skills as well as improving their intercultural competence. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you very much for listening in, for taking the time to watch this presentation. And if you have any follow-up questions or suggestions of any kind, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the screen. It's teresa.schenker@yale.edu. And I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your conference.